everyone. Can everyone hear me well? All good? Well, it's really nice to be here, to be able to connect with the insights industry in person. When I accepted to do this little gig, I wasn't sure it was going to be at the same time where I'm relocating to actually Atlanta. It's been just a week ago. And to tie back to the subject of today, my very first shopper experience was quite interesting. I went to a grocery store, and immediately as I walked in, my habitual shopping kicked in. I knew what I wanted, so I started following the same path that I was doing basically back home. Except that my points of references were not there. So I didn't know where to look for the items that I wanted. I felt lost, a bit annoyed, walked around in circles quite suspiciously at some point. But despite all of that, I ended up buying the same things that I would buy back home with the same volume, except back home we're two people in the household, very hungry people. And so carrying those 10 bags of groceries in and out of an Uber on a rainy day was nothing but delightful. So by the time I got home, all the excitement of trying these new products, these new brands was completely gone. So I set up for a cup of tea and some chocolate that I brought from home because I was in desperate need for comfort. So all of that to say that we as human beings, we've been through a lot lately. And most recently, we are tasked to navigate a much more complex environment when it comes to things such as shopping. The commerce channels are more hybrid than they ever be. They're less siloed, they're more unified. Commerce is basically everywhere you look. And so what it did is that it kind of changed our perspective around these channels, what expectations we have from these channels, what do we qualify as added value today, and even the role that they're playing and who and which channel do we choose to reach out to. So all of this took a really toll on us to rapidly adapt to our environment. And pretty much all the industries that we represent today, we are in the business today of the delivery of exceptional experiences. No matter who we are, no matter who we work for, at the end of the day, we're here to deliver an exceptional experience to our target audience. These experiences now need to be connected because we now need to meet our target audiences where they are, where they spend their time, not the other way around. It's no longer about directing them, it's about meeting them where they are. And so as human beings, of course, we do go through experiences on a daily basis. And our environment is still not settled. The environment is still changing. Nothing is settled yet from the 2.5 years that we've been through. And so thinking about that, the behaviors of our target audience are going to continue to be changing, adapting constantly to the rapidly changing environment. And so when we took a few steps back and reflected a little bit on, as a human insight function, what do we need to do to actually help the business navigate this environment, navigate this rapid change? And by being consumer-centric, we thought that was one of the first things that we needed to establish as the discipline of every single associate in the organization. Being human-centric truly means putting the humans first. It's not about your brand. It's not about your market. It's not about your business. It's about what are people about? What do they feel? What do they go through? What are the things that they need before you start even bringing your brand or your business into the picture? And that is still a cultural change that we're pushing through, but it does ensure that anything you do, whether it's an innovation, a piece of communication, or a piece of an activation, is going to resonate because it starts from the human and what the human needs versus starting from the business, the brand, and trying to find who will be interested in that proposition. The second thing is, traditionally, the way we did research for so many years is that we were asking much more than what we were listening or observing. So we kind of relooked at all our shopper journey mapping protocols, and we needed them to be in the moment at the heart. So asking less, observing more, leveraging mobile first, being in a position that we don't need to ask a single question, but we will get all the knowledge that we need by just being closer to those people, observing them, not disrupting them, not asking them to tap into their memory. I mean, in all fairness, if I ask you what you've done specifically in the past 3 days ago and tell me exactly what you've done from 8 a.m. to 9 p.m., I'm pretty sure 90% of those answers will be pure guess. But still, for some reason, we've been operating with that data for so many years. So we decided to be bold enough to tell the business enough is enough. We need to rebalance that perspective. The second pillar was around thinking about that end-to-end approach, winning across the moment of truth. It's from the zero moment of truth all the way to the ultimate moment of truth. And that would mean that every single shopper protocol shouldn't be about the at-shop stage in silo. What happens pre-shop in another study? What happens after people acquire solutions, experience them, consume them in another study? We had to look at it end to end, following the journey of that particular individual from the moment they are living their life to the moment that they've tried our products, and they will tell us basically why they will be coming back or why they won't be coming back in the future. So that kind of kicked a little bit the foundational studies protocols that we had, and we came with something really completely different. The third pillar was around that concept of connected end-to-end experiences, and that meant breaking the line that today in most of the CPG companies separates the consumer centricity from the shopper centricity, even extending it to the customer centricity. There are tons of best practices in, for example, China, where there is a strong and tight collaboration with the retailers to actually develop innovations. Because think about it, you're going to develop a solution, but you need to take into consideration the environment where that solution is going to live at the end of the day. So really being customer back is as important as starting from the human and the shopper and making sure that these, most of the time, are the same people. And by being human-centric, it also meant acknowledging that we as human beings, we are simply creatures of habits, and that experiences are the basis of our daily lives. And so what it did for our journey mapping exercise is that we needed to look at this particular practice through the lenses of those various habits and experiences that could shape, influence, or get in the way of seamless and frictionless journeys. And so when you think about the logical flow, it all starts with, do you have today a habitual way of shopping or dining? What are the mechanisms that are already in place? What are the autopilot modes that you generally are not even aware of them, but still that's what drives what you're going to put in place to address your needs, solve your tensions, and engage with your various trip missions. Then the channel experience that you may have had out there with one, two, or multiple channels are going to, at the end, influence which channel or channels you're going to be engaging with, which ones you're going to navigate, and which ones you're going to eventually choose as, this is where I'm going to get my solution. This is where I get the products or services that I need. In those channels, the experience that you're going to have is going to eventually determine whether your categories or brands have generated the stopping power, meaning you've attracted their attention at some point. The engagement power or the holding power, meaning that they've went to the point that they picked your product, looked at it, stood in front of your display, engaged with your ad or your display, and did it actually lead to a transaction, which is the converting power. Now, once the solutions are acquired, eventually these are going to be consumed. These are going to be, at some point, engaged with. And so the understanding, not stopping at the moment where, okay, we know they bought or we know they didn't buy. But when they got to experience those products or services, understanding what eventually is going to make them come back or not come back, but also what drives loyalty, what drives that advocacy dynamics that are crucial so that we can eventually drive a habitual consumption. The habitual consumption is simply those rituals that we as human beings naturally put in many aspects of our lives. And so all those elements that will, at the end, trigger a seamless journey that will enable you to bypass the search and consideration stages, because that's where you are most vulnerable, is when people are thinking, oh, who should I buy today? What service should I subscribe to? What brand is going to be the best one for my Saturday night with friends? You don't want to be there. You want to be in a situation where once they're satisfied with the promise, you actually delivered on the promise you've given them, it goes straight to acquisition. You bypass all the other stages because in the other stages, you're kind of vulnerable to who you're competing with. And so all of that just pushed us to be a little bit more diligent with our measurements and foundational studies frameworks. And quite frankly, what we ended up doing is that we completely trashed 3 protocols that were sitting in 3 different places, and we just glued together an end-to-end what we call the unified commerce journey mapping that is actually also mirroring the way we design brand experiences today. It has to be end-to-end, and it's most importantly has to start with the human and end with the human at the soul of the process. So I wanted to share with you today how we got to where we are today, the journey that I think the microphone is carrying on me. But I'd love to hear from you today. What was your journey, this particular practice or exercise, or if you have any comments or question, pretty much would kept my presentation short to allow more time for you guys to engage.
Thank you. That was great. You have one of the most powerful brands in the world, and I'm interested in hearing from you across the customer journey that you have described and that you are apparently following from A to Z. How important do you think brands are in the daily life of the people that you're trying to sell to?
Well, it's kind of that question where is sometimes the reason why innovations don't succeed in the marketplace, or sometimes even your brand building efforts don't succeed, is because you need your consumers to see that you're playing a meaningful role in their lives. And that's what we try to start the whole journey with, is infusing the business with that foundational knowledge to enable us to find what is that meaningful role that each of our brand is going to play, because it does answer a human tension. It's not just about being a very functional brand, which some functional brands do have a role, or play a tactical role at the same time. But if you're not really attached or associated with the human tension that you're trying to alleviate or solve for, then you're only going to last as good as the next best offer. And that's what makes brands today most vulnerable, if they don't have that meaningful role in people's lives. And sometimes it's not easy to find, but you need to allocate the right diligence and the quality of time to actually find that. And that pushed us to actually relook at some of our brand positionings today to be a little bit more sharp in what is it that we're trying to solve here? What is the role that we want to play in people's lives? And we've done a lot of work this year just reviewing and sharpening that brand essence and making the emphasis on what is the role that we want to play in people's lives. If that is clear, everything else should be quite consistent with it. When that piece is either vague or not distinctive or unique enough, then you're mostly likely vulnerable to your competitive environment.
Any other questions or experiences? All right, in the back.
I have a question. When you mentioned unified customer journey, that's like a unicorn to my ears because my company has tried that as part of a Lean Six Sigma approach to try to adjust our approach to our customers. And we have so many different products to different people that it was kind of hard to do that, and we're kind of still trying to do that. So hearing that is great that you were able to do it with such a big enterprise and such a global reach. What would you say are the most important considerations to get there? I know you mentioned you took different pieces apart and you smashed it and came back together. I'm more interested in that construction part. What are some of the things that you would recommend someone like me pay attention to try to get that single view instead of getting too much in the minutia?
Yeah. I would say one thing that we've typically always did, I would say not so effectively when we took some steps back and think about it, is we jumped straight into our business, beverages. That was our starting point. While people's lives don't gravitate around beverages, there are so many other things in our life that we're constantly worried about, stimulated by, thinking about it, or not so much thinking about it. So my first recommendation was, don't start from your business. If you have a specific target audience in mind, start with the people. Start with those individuals. Try to understand what is it that they go through on a daily basis. And once you understand what are the basis of what drives them in their lives, then you can identify what is it that you have as a company that can actually play a meaningful role into solving these tensions. All these exercises that we've done, none of them were category specific. In fact, the first 2 stages of the exercise was pretty much category agnostic. We just wanted to understand what is it that people are going through in their daily lives. So that would be my first recommendation. Now, when you start that broad, at some point you need to sharpen your funnel. So even for us, with the multitude of brands that we have, and pretty much you can drink a beverage at any time during the day, we had to be a little bit more choiceful on the areas that we know are the priority sources of growth for the next 3 years. Doesn't have to be as far as 5 or 10, but in the next 3 years, where are your most important sources of growth? Anchor your deep dives against these. Because once you develop the foundational knowledge for these critical areas of growth, your biggest ROI is going to come of these. Anything else that's going to come as a nice to have or a add-on to the exercise, hold on to it. Don't spread yourself too thin, because then it becomes very hard for you as an inside professional to share all that knowledge with the business. You're just going to end up scaring the business away because there's simply too much. So what we've done is that from all the volume, we only selected the things that we know the business is going to spend their time, their effort, and their money against. The rest is available when the business is done with these priorities, and there is a mental space for them to go beyond that. If I have to give you just 2 major advices, that will be it. Start broad enough so that you're really, truly human-centric. Sharpen as much as you can, because at the end of the day, the business can only execute against few priorities and not everything.
Y'all got the good questions and great answers today. Anybody else, or I need to step in with my question here? All right, well, I have a question because I'm from the South and I live down the street and can see your tower from everywhere. I think for all of us Atlanta folks, we know Coke is everywhere. Coca-Cola, let me be very specific. But question for you, Coca-Cola is not just a beverage brand, it's really a lifestyle. For those that are not from the South, there's a place called Cracker Barrel, and they have been selling Coca-Cola merchandise since probably before I was born. Does your team, when you're thinking about end-to-end, do y'all research for that division when it comes to, the polar bear collectibles and the lunch boxes and the merchandise piece? Do you consider that as end-to-end, or is that completely separate division from where your team sits?
I would say typically the merchandising and licensing team was typically a function that we've never interacted with in the past, at least personally. What we've realized is that that particular area is also a component of the brand experience you're going to deliver. It is an expression of how the brand can get closer to its target audience, just as a can, a plastic bottle, or a fountain drink. So I think what we've done now is that we brought this team into our radar to try and understand what is it that they seek to understand from a merchandising and licensing perspective that we can attach to the exercise. Because it is a touch point. A Coke t-shirt, having a set of Coca-Cola glasses in your house, all of these things tend to remind about the brand, tend to remind about the consumption occasion, and so it should not live as a silo. It should be integrated. That's why we've completely relooked at the communication department, and now they are being called integrated marketing experiences, where now the licensing team are part of it.
I love that. I just was, excited. I am a Sequoia, and I was just so excited. I don't know if y'all remember the Coca-Cola name on the bottle campaign, and I was just so excited. And at the time, I worked for corporate Winn-Dixie, and y'all pulled up in this, well, not you, obviously, but y'all pulled up as a brand to corporate Winn-Dixie down in Jacksonville, Florida, and we were able to customize our actual names to Coca-Cola as part of the rollout. And I just remember being like, man, who thought of that? And I think, I want to say it's market researchers, somebody out there found out that, hey, everybody's name isn't on things. Can you tell us more about that story? Do you know anything about it?
That idea actually originated down under in Australia. That was the very first market that actually came out with that idea. And it wasn't easy for them to actually get it to the marketplace because it was so unusual. Putting people's names on your bottle could go in so many ways, and one of them could be terribly wrong if you don't do it well. But I think it was a combination of really taking that concept of we want to get closer to the people, we want to get closer to our audience, and what is it, the expression of being close to someone as having their own name on the beverage bottle that they purchase, that they love. And so I can spend hours talking about how hard it was from a public affair perspective, from a legal standpoint, like all the guardrails that had to be put against that idea, but it was bold enough that the company took a chance to take it out there, and quite frankly, that idea traveled pretty much everywhere in the world effortlessly. It's probably one of our most impactful campaigns that the company has put out there, that the brand has carried out there, but it wasn't easy. It wasn't easy. And I think what we learned from it is that we shouldn't be scared by bold and disruptive ideas, and we should know when to actually just go and experiment things and pilot things out there and learn from it. It could have been a failure at the end of the day, but it was a beautiful success because it had such an organic connection with the consumers that we just enabled that behavior to happen with very little heavy lifting, because again, the idea came from a strong human-centric point of view that enabled that idea to travel in any country in the world with fairly not a lot of heavy lifting for success. So, yeah.
I love that. Oh, great. We have one more question, y'all. And we probably have room for another one after this if anybody has any.
Great, thank you. My question was around, I really liked the Diet Coke ad campaign as well, which was very similar, very human-centric. It was like, Diet Coke people are thought of this, but we're really like all of these kinds of people as well. And it led me to think, when you're doing user journey research, you interview a lot of people, and I feel like every time I interview a new person, it's like a different journey, right? And Coke being such a big brand with so many multitudes and flavors, and you can taste every flavor of Coke at Coke World, right? How do you kind of simplify that story and make that insight actionable for people?
Yeah. Well, ultimately, again, there is not one single journey out there, right? Like, you can land into hundreds of journeys, but what we wanted to focus on is what is the most frequent journey that we are observing out there? And we're going to focus on that. Because at the end, you cannot dictate every single journey, but by putting our effort against scalable solutions, scalable cases, we are enabling the efficiency to kick in. And then what we tell the operating units usually is that you have the leeway to customize and to adapt the idea to increase the chances of success locally, but it all comes back from, the big pieces of opportunities that we know are going to deliver. Anything on top of that, only if the business has the latitude to execute with excellence against it, is encouraged to be done. Otherwise, what we ended up with usually is fragmented campaigns, which are too different for the brand to stand with that global voice. So the idea is to be choiceful, and it's not easy. We all had to struggle with making choices in our organization. So we're pushing also the business to be a little bit more, it's okay to make a choice. It's okay to renounce, because choosing is renouncing. But as long as we focus on the biggest opportunities, that at least is once taken care of. If you have leeway to do more, then do more.
All right. Are all hearts and minds clear? Do we have any more questions or thoughts? All hearts and minds are clear? Talk back with me. I don't know. We feel good? Okay, we got one more. Awesome. So y'all got all the good questions in the back. There's your mic right behind you.
Hey, Bill Soliker from Skim.
Oh, hey.
So here's a question. I just asked my colleague this question. It's one I have not really thought about. Is it better to have a recall journey that is my typical journey? So if I think about buying soft drinks, how I typically think about buying Coca-Cola, versus a very detailed, specific journey from the last time I bought Coke, which may or may not be typical of how I buy Coke or some other product. And I don't know if that's a question we've really asked ourselves, but I just think I'd love your take on that.
Yeah. I mean, it is that, that dilemma between relying on recall, which typically only gonna give you the most habitual behavior that you've engaged with often and often enough that you can actually recall it to a certain degree of accuracy. Or you want to go and actually be more observational, relying less on the memory. But what we've done is that we kind of put in place a hybrid approach where we kind of actually did both. So focusing on the past 24 to 48 hour maximum, because that's where scientifically your memory is still working for you. Beyond that, you're guessing pretty much a lot. But what we've done is that on the side, the in-the-moment modules were there to calibrate what's, I would say, habitual from just, oh yeah, this is just maybe a journey that was exceptional in the behaviors of the consumer. So really marrying both, because being 100% in the moment is not feasible because it's freaking expensive today. So it's all about finding the right balance, because you need scale, but you need calibration at the same time. So I would say for now, I think from what I've seen in the industry, having a balance of both is the right way to go. I think we're not yet in a situation where we can say in the moment is actually pretty attainable to do it fully in our protocols. Yeah.
Y'all should have bet some money on it. All right, well, y'all give a big hand clap. Thank you so much.